Hi kids, today I'm going to talk to you about my favourite movies. I've got, I think, 6 or so movies that I'm going to talk to you about. They're not necessarily my favourite overall movies, but they are the movies that first sprang to my mind when I was trying to construct the list. So they're subject to change later, if you see what I mean. A good example of that is the first movie that I'm going to talk about is Donnie Darko. Now, Donnie Darko is a movie which I really liked when I first saw it. I liked it so much that 5 days later, after I saw it in the cinema, I'd already purchased it on order from another country that had the same region code as Britain. But despite the fact that it's got some absolutely beautiful shots and it's got an interesting plot, which is basically about a somnambulist who, after a time travel event, develops some superpowers of a type and uses them to take down an evil Patrick Swayze and save the world that he is part of, at least. Despite the fact that I really enjoyed it at the time, and I still think it's got one of the most beautiful opening shots of all time, on later viewing I did start to notice that there's a kind of immaturity to the way the script is written. Also, in addition to that, Drew Barrymore's performance is, let's just say it could be better. But because I enjoyed it so much at the time, it's still I still decided to keep it on my list. Because in a way, it is sort of my official favourite film, even though now perhaps it's got some problems, I'll admit. So, the next movie on my list is Gwemel, the Host. Its Korean name is Gwemel, and translated, apparently that means the host. This is a kind of monster movie set in Korea. The basic story of it is that after dumping formaldehyde into the Seoul River, a sort of mutated squid monster is attacking the city, and how it affects one particular family, the Park family. Now, this film has got absolutely everything that a film should have in one film. It's got comedy, it's got tragedy, it's got political satire, it will tug at your heartstrings, it's also got horror elements, amazing special effects, great soundtrack, and I don't want to say too much about it because I don't want to spoil it, but if you haven't seen The Host, you should really check it out because it is an amazing piece of work, an amazing film. My next favourite movie is a film written by Quentin Tarantino, directed by Oliver Stone. It is, of course, Natural Born Killers. The story of 2 murderers, Mickey and Mallory Knox, a couple, going on a murderous spree across America, and their eventual imprisonment and their subsequent appearance on television. Now, this is a film which has a really rather simple story, except it's been presented in such a way by Oliver Stone as to be viewed through the lens of an intense acid trip, where everything on the mental plane you get to see visually in front of you. It's also got a rather interesting editing style with hundreds of jump cuts, which it's also got a really interesting editing style, which Oliver Stone uses to express different ways, which he uses to demonstrate the way that different people can interpret the same spoken sentences in different ways. It's got a range of genres inside it, such as there's a kind of American sitcom spoof in there, there's a cartoon, there's all sorts of little snippets of other things cut into it. And it also makes you think in a philosophical way about the nature of man and how she fits into a modern society. It also talks a lot about the way that TV affects our psychology, and in fact there's even one scene where the murderers have across their chest the words "too much TV." So it's definitely a film about modern life and the way that we fit into it, and the media. I cannot recommend this highly enough. Don't watch it if you have a problem with violence, because obviously a film called Natural Born Killers has quite a lot of violence in it, but most of the violence is kind of done in a quite cartoony way, and so it's probably easier to palate than something like Saw or Hostel. Which brings me on to my third choice. My third choice is the first film in the Saw franchise. Now, I think generally these sorts of films get a bad rap for being something called torture porn. Now, I don't really agree with the term torture porn. I think that it's a way of dismissing something that people find distressing rather than paying attention to what the actual content of the media is. There's been several films which have been labelled as torture porn, including Saw and the Hostel franchise, both of which I think, if you care to view them in a particular way, you can see how the quality of writing, particularly in Hostel, of the dialogue is absolutely impeccable. And I would even say that it's on a par with people who've been commended for their dialogue writing, such as Tarantino or even Harold Pinter. Anyway, going back to Saw, Saw is a very clever movie for several reasons. The first one is, if you're trying to construct a scene that has tension, what you traditionally do is you give the characters in that scene a very difficult personal decision to make that has ramifications for their life, and you give them a time limit on that decision. It's difficult to think of a scene which creates tension which doesn't have that same mechanic in it. On its very basic level, it's the should I cut the green wire or the blue wire when defusing a bomb. It's a simple decision with a time limit that creates this feeling of tension. That's why that's a cliche and has been overused. But in every film, from Hitchcock to the sort of modern film noir like LA Confidential and things, all of the films that want to include this kind of thrilling, jittery, edge of your seat feeling, they include that mechanic. What they've done with Saw is they've taken that mechanic and made it their murderer's modus operandi, which means that in literally every scene where there is a death, it's after a scene of the most intense audience stress I think has ever been committed to film. Also, the design of the film is absolutely beautiful in the way it's filmed. It may appear to be a cliche now, but that's because after that film was made, every horror movie that had no sense of originality just ripped it off. And then after that, Saw was kind of lumped in as a whole with those films. But it was the first one to do it. Now, if you've dismissed Saw 1 as being horror and exploitative junk, and you are not worried by violence and gore, then I advise you to give it another try, viewing it with the idea that it may be a work of art and actually a very intelligent film. I think that it's not just a great horror movie, it's just a great movie. So the next movie I'm going to talk about briefly is Shaun of the Dead. Now I imagine most of you have seen this, so I won't really talk about it too much, and I also imagine that if you haven't seen this film, you know that you kind of should. It's almost a perfect movie in terms of its plot structure, and it's actually quite a carefully thought out satire of modern life, as well as just being entertaining. It's funny, and they managed to make the zombies scary as well as it being funny, and you do genuinely believe in the peril that they're in, despite the fact it's a comedy horror. Because often in comedy horrors, the comedy means that the horror is less dangerous seeming. But the characters are in genuine peril. They're just funny people, I guess. And at the same time, of course, it's a British film, so yeah. Yeah, so if you haven't seen that, you should watch it. Come on. So the final film I'm going to talk about is a film called Brazil by Terry Gilliam. Terry Gilliam has always been one of my favourite directors, and this film is possibly his greatest film. He's been responsible for a number of really good films, including Time Bandits, Baron Munchausen, 12 Monkeys, but I think Brazil is his masterpiece, if I had to choose one. It's an incredibly prophetic film, and it's set in the future, and many things that it predicts about current life have actually come true. The incredible surveillance, the ridiculous bureaucracy, the threat of terrorism. And it's if you haven't seen it, I really advise that you check it out. It's a little-known gem, and it is absolutely brilliant. If you haven't seen any Terry Gilliam films, start with something lighter like Time Bandits or Baron Munchausen, but really you should check out all of his films, because they're all really good, with the possible exception of the Brothers Grimm. We'll put that to one side for the moment. The rest of them are all really good. And I can't recommend him highly enough as a director. So that's my list of movies. I've made this provisional list just to give you guys an idea of where I'm coming from, so that when I talk about other movies, you'll have an idea of whether you should listen to me or whether my opinions jive with yours, or if you completely disagree with everything that I said, you'll know to take my subsequent videos and reverse the meaning and do the opposite of what I advise. Let me know in the comments below if you agree or disagree with any of my choices, and if, based on the movies that I like, if you've got a movie that you could recommend to me. I'm always looking for new movies, and that would be lovely. Like and subscribe for more. Bye!